The sun was sinking low over the dusty fields, painting the sky in deep orange and gold when the boy noticed something wasn't right. He had been walking home barefoot along the narrow path near the old banyan trees, a bundle of firewood balanced carefully in his arms. His village was quiet at this hour, the kind of silence that usually felt safe and familiar. But that evening an uneasy feeling crept into his chest. As if the air itself was holding its breath, he heard at first a sharp intake of breath, not far from the path. The boy froze. His heart started to pound. In the village, elders often warned children about wandering strangers, about danger hiding in the bush. Every instinct told him to hurry home. But then he heard it again, this time clearer, weaker. Someone was in pain. Slowly, carefully, he stepped off the path and pushed aside the tall grass. What he saw made his stomach drop. A young man lay on the ground, his face pale and slick with sweat, one hand clutching his ankle. Coiled just a short distance away, half hidden in the leaves, was a snake long, thick, and unmistakably venomous. Its body was tense, ready to strike again if disturbed. The boy's breath caught in his throat. He had seen snakes before, but never this close, never after a bite. He knew the stories. Snakebite could kill within hours, sometimes minutes. The man's eyes met his, filled with fear and desperation, yet strangely calm too, as if he was already slipping away. "Please," the stranger whispered, his voice barely audible. "Help me." The boy's hands trembled. He was just a child, thin and small for his age, wearing worn clothes patched too many times to count. What could he possibly do? But turning away meant leaving the man to die. The boy remembered his mother's words, spoken softly whenever he hesitated to do the right thing. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to act despite it. Swallowing hard, the boy grabbed a long stick from the ground and waved it toward the snake, shouting as loudly as he could. The snake hissed, reared up, then slowly slithered back into the bush, disappearing as suddenly as it had appeared. The danger wasn't completely gone, but the immediate threat had passed. The boy rushed to the man's side. The bite mark on his ankle was already swelling, dark veins spreading outward like ink in water. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to remember what the village healer had taught everyone during the monsoon season. Keep the victim calm. Slow the spread of venom. "Get help fast. I'll help you," the boy said, his voice shaking but determined. He tore a strip from his own shirt and tied it tightly above the bite, doing his best to keep his hands steady. The man winced but didn't cry out. Up close, the boy noticed the stranger didn't look like anyone from nearby villages. His clothes, though now dusty and torn, were made of fine fabric. His hands, despite the dirt, bore no calluses of hard labor. There was something different about him, something the boy couldn't quite place. "We need to get you to the healer," the boy said. "It's far, but I'll try." The man nodded weakly. "You're brave," he murmured. "What is your name?" The boy hesitated. "Arav," he finally said. "Arav," the man repeated. As if committing it to memory. With great effort, the boy helped the man sit up. The stranger leaned heavily on him, far heavier than the boy expected, but adrenaline gave him strength he didn't know he had. Step by step, they moved toward the village, the path blurring as sweat stung the boy's eyes. Every few minutes, the man stumbled, his breathing growing shallow, his grip tightening painfully around the boy's shoulders. Halfway there, the man collapsed. The boy's heart nearly stopped. He shook the man gently, calling his name, though he didn't know it. The stranger's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Don't leave me," he whispered. "I won't," the boy said quickly, fear tightening his throat. "I promise." He ran ahead, leaving the firewood behind, sprinting barefoot over stones and thorns until his feet burned. He burst into the village, shouting for help, his voice cracking with desperation. People rushed out of their homes, startled by his cries. When they saw his terror, they followed without question. The healer worked quickly, her hands practiced and calm. She crushed herbs, murmured prayers, and carefully treated the wound. The boy stood nearby, watching every movement, his hands clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the healer leaned back and sighed. "He will live?" she said. "You brought him just in time?" Relief crashed over the boy so suddenly his knees almost gave out. He hadn't realized how tense he'd been until that moment. He watched as the stranger was laid on a mat, given water, and covered with a blanket. His breathing slowly steadied, color returning to his face. That night, the boy couldn't sleep. Images of the snake, the bite, the stranger's fading eyes replayed in his mind. He wondered who the man was, why he had been alone near the fields, and what would have happened if he hadn't stopped to listen. At dawn, the village awoke to an unfamiliar sound, the low hum of engines. Dust rose on the horizon as several black vehicles approached, sleek and imposing, unlike anything the villagers had ever seen. People gathered, whispering nervously, clutching their children close. The boy stepped outside his home, his heart pounding again, though this time for a different reason. He didn't know why, but he felt that whatever was coming had something to do with the man he had saved. The vehicle stopped near the healer's hut. Men in formal clothes stepped out, scanning the village with alert eyes. One of them hurried inside the hut. Moments later, he emerged, his expression a mix of relief and awe. The stranger followed, now standing tall despite a bandage around his ankle. He looked different, somehow stronger, composed, his eyes sharp and clear. The boy barely recognized him. The man's gaze swept over the crowd until it landed on Arav. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that made the boy's chest tighten. "There he is," the man said softly. The villagers fell silent as the stranger took a step forward, supported by one of the men beside him. "This boy saved my life," he announced. "If not for his courage, I would not be standing here today." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The boy felt every eye turned toward him. Heat rushed to his face, and he wished he could disappear into the ground. What he didn't know, what no one in the village could have imagined, was that the man he had rescued was not just a traveler, not just a stranger lost on a rural path. He was the crown prince of a powerful kingdom, hidden from the world. And Arav's single brave choice had just changed both their lives forever, and this was only the beginning. The village stood frozen in disbelief as the stranger's words echoed in the morning air. Arav felt his ears ringing, his heart thudding so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. Crown Prince. The words didn't make sense to him. Princes lived in palaces, wore gold, and were protected by armies. They didn't walk alone near fields or get bitten by snakes where poor village boys had to save them. Yet the men standing behind the stranger said everything his young mind needed to know. Their posture was disciplined, their eyes sharp and alert, their clothes simple but expensive. These were not ordinary travelers. The prince took a slow step forward, ignoring the hushed whispers spreading through the crowd. His gaze never left Arav. "When I collapsed yesterday," he said calmly, "this boy had every reason to run away. He is small, he is poor. He had nothing to gain, but he stayed. He fought his fear. He saved a life." The villagers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at Arav with pride, others with fear. Helping a powerful man could bring blessings, but it could also bring trouble. Arav's mother pushed through the crowd, her face pale. She pulled him close, her arms trembling as she held him. "You went near a snake?" she whispered, half angry, half terrified. Arav nodded, unable to speak. One of the guards stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing his head slightly, "we should leave. It's not safe to stay exposed." The prince raised a hand. In a moment, he turned back to Arav and gently crouched down so they were eye to eye. "You did not know who I was," he said softly. "That makes your bravery worth even more." Arav stared at him, confused. I couldn't leave you," he replied honestly. "You were hurt." The prince smiled, and for the first time since the vehicles arrived, the tension eased. "Because of you," he said, "I have been given another chance at life." He stood and addressed the village again. "My guards failed me yesterday. I traveled in disguise to understand my people without fear or ceremony. That choice nearly cost me my life. This boy saved me when power and status meant nothing." The guards exchanged uneasy looks. The villagers listened in stunned silence. "I will return," the prince continued, his voice firm. "But before I do, I wish to reward this child and his family." At that, murmurs turned into gasps. Arav's mother stiffened. "No," she said quietly, shaking her head. "We didn't help for reward?" The prince nodded respectfully. "I know, that is why the reward must be worthy." Within minutes, the guards began moving with purpose. One of them spoke quietly into a device. Another handed the prince a folder. The efficiency was overwhelming. Arav felt small again, like a leaf caught in a storm he didn't understand. Before leaving, the prince placed his hand gently on Arav's shoulder. "Remember this," he said. "Kindness reveals who you are when no one is watching." The vehicles departed as suddenly as they had arrived, leaving behind silence, dust, and a village full of questions. For days after, life felt strange. People who had barely noticed Arav before now greeted him with respect. Some praised him. Others warned him to stay quiet, to not attract attention. His mother barely let him out of her sight, fear etched into her face. Then, one afternoon, a royal messenger arrived. This time there was no confusion. A single horse, a formal letter sealed with gold, and a calm voice that asked for Arav by name. The letter invited Arav and his mother to the capital. Fear and excitement twisted together in Arav's stomach. The capital was something he had only heard of in stories: vast buildings, endless crowds, shining halls. It didn't feel real. The journey took days. Arav watched landscapes change through the carriage window fields, giving way to towns, towns to cities. Everything felt louder, faster, bigger. When they finally arrived, the palace rose before them like something from another world. Towers of stone, gates guarded by soldiers, banners fluttering in the wind. Arav's legs felt weak as they stepped inside. They were led through long corridors until they reached a sunlit hall. At the far end stood the prince, now dressed in royal attire. He looked nothing like the injured man Arav had helped. Power surrounded him like an invisible cloak. Yet when he saw Arav, his expression softened. "You came," he said warmly. Arav bowed awkwardly, copying what he had seen others do. "Yes, your majesty." The prince laughed gently. "When we are alone, you may call me by my name. I owe you my life, not ceremony." He gestured for them to sit and spoke openly. "I have enemies," he admitted. "People who would use my death to gain power. That snakebite was not an accident. Someone led me there." Arav's eyes widened. "You were never meant to be involved," the prince continued. "But fate chose you." He paused, then said something that made Arav's breath catch. "I want you to come live here. To study. To learn, to grow into the kind of man who already lives inside you." Arav's mother gasped. "He is just a boy," she said. "This world is not for him," the prince nodded. "That is why he needs protection, guidance, and opportunity. I will ensure he is safe." Silence stretched between them. Arav felt torn in two. The palace was beautiful, but it was not home. Yet the chance to learn, to escape poverty, to help his family, it felt impossible to ignore. That night, Arav lay awake in a guest room larger than his entire house back in the village. He stared at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. He hadn't meant to save a prince. He hadn't meant to change his life. But one choice had led to another, and now he stood at the edge of a future he never imagined. In the distance, palace guards patrolled silently. Somewhere beyond the walls, threats still lurked. And though Arav didn't know it yet, his bond with the prince had placed him in the center of a story far bigger than either of them. A story where courage would be tested again, and where saving a life was only the first step. The night air inside the palace felt heavy, filled with secrets Arav could sense but not yet understand. Morning arrived quietly, sunlight spilling across marble floors as servants moved with practiced silence. Arav stood by the window, looking out at gardens that seemed to stretch forever. Somewhere beyond those walls was the simple life he knew, and somewhere within them was a future unfolding faster than his heart could keep up with. Later that day, the prince invited Arav to walk with him. No guards followed closely, only at a respectful distance. I didn't bring you here to turn you into something you're not, the prince said as they moved through the gardens. I brought you here because you already are something rare. Arav listened carefully. People keep staring at me, he said. Like I don't belong. The prince nodded. They stare because courage confuses those who live behind power. You acted when others would have hesitated. That frightened some people. Their walk ended near a quiet courtyard where an elderly man waited. His eyes were sharp, his posture calm and commanding. This is Master Devraj, the prince said. He will teach you many things, not just books but judgment. Days turned into weeks. Arav's life changed completely. Mornings began early with lessons reading, history, strategy. Afternoons were spent learning discipline, understanding people, and sometimes simply listening. He struggled at first, feeling slow, among students born into privilege. But he remembered the snake, the fear, and how he hadn't turned away. That memory carried him through, one evening. As rain tapped softly against palace windows, Arav overheard raised voices from behind a closed door. He didn't mean to listen, but his name stopped him cold. He knows too much, a man hissed. The boy is a liability, Arav's chest tightened. He stepped back quietly, his heart racing. That night, sleep refused to come. The palace suddenly felt less like a dream and more like a maze. The next morning, the prince called him in. His face was serious. I will not lie to you, he said. There are those who see you as a threat. Not because of what you know, but because of what you represent, Arav swallowed. Did I make a mistake coming here? The prince shook his head firmly. No, you revealed something dangerous. The truth. That even without power, a single act of goodness can change everything. From that moment, Arav understood his life would never be simple again. He trained harder, listened more carefully, and learned to stay observant. The palace was full of beauty, but also shadows. Then one night, chaos broke out. Shouts echoed through the corridors. Guards ran. Arav was woken by pounding at his door. A guard pulled him into a hidden passage, his voice low and urgent. Stay silent, no matter what you hear. Arav's heart hammered as they moved through narrow stone tunnels. Somewhere above them, danger moved fast. When they finally emerged into a secure chamber, the prince was already there. His expression controlled but fierce. They tried, the prince said quietly, and they failed. Arav realized then how close everything had come to ending. Not just for the prince, but for himself. After that night, things changed. The prince became more protective. Trust was narrowed, and Arav was no longer just a guest. He was being prepared. Months passed. Arav grew stronger, sharper, more confident. He learned how power worked, how decisions shaped lives far beyond palace walls. Yet through it all, the prince reminded him of one thing again and again. Never forget who you were when you saved me. One day, a message arrived from Arav's village. His mother was ill. Without hesitation, the prince ordered preparations. You will go to her, he said, with protection, with dignity. Returning home felt surreal. The village looked smaller now, but the people looked at Arav with awe. He knelt beside his mother, holding her hand, tears blurring his vision. I'm here, he whispered. She smiled weakly. I knew you'd find your place, she said. Just don't lose your heart. When Arav returned to the palace, something inside him had settled. He knew who he was now, not a boy chosen by chance, but a young man shaped by choice. Years later, when the prince stood before the nation as king, Arav stood beside him not in shadow, but in trust. His story was told not as a legend of royalty, but as proof that greatness can rise from anywhere, and it all began with a snake bite, a frightened boy, and a moment where walking away would have been easier, but kindness chose otherwise.